A human cook made a dish that saved an alien child, but it was forbidden. The alien, forbidden to touch human food, watched him for 7 nights. Then, she chose to break the law. What happens when compassion becomes the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy? Where are you watching from? Subscribe to uncover the truth behind this forbidden meal. Let's begin. The empty table sat in the corner like a question no one wanted to answer. Daniel Rourke wiped it down for the 3rd time that evening, though no one had sat there in weeks, maybe months. The cloth moved in slow circles across the scarred wood, a rhythm he'd perfected over 2 years of running Haven's Rest, the only human-owned restaurant in a village where 2 species pretended to coexist. Outside, the blue mountains of Tirvain caught the last light of the twin suns, turning the peaks the color of old bruises. Beautiful and painful, just like everything else on this colony world. A miner laughed at the bar. Dr. Chen, the human geologist, was telling the story about the methane pocket again. Daniel half listened while he prepped vegetables for tomorrow's stew. His hands knew the work: peel, chop, rinse. The same motions his brother had taught him before the war, before the fleet, before everything went dark. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and something else. Something like ozone and starlight. She was tall. Avari always were. Her skin caught the lamplight and gave it back softer, like she was made of moonstone. Silver robes marked her as someone important, though Daniel couldn't read the symbols. Her eyes, iridescent green shifting to gold, swept the room before settling on him. Then she walked to the empty table and sat down. The restaurant went quiet. Even the miner stopped mid-laugh. Daniel approached with a menu, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Up close, he could see the fine patterns in her skin, like frost on glass. She smelled like rain on metal. "Good evening," he said. "Can I get you something?" She studied him with those impossible eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm as deep water. "I cannot eat what you make." He blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I could try to. But I would like to watch you cook." She folded her hands on the table. "If that is acceptable." Daniel looked at Dr. Chen, who shrugged. He looked at the miner, who had suddenly found his drink fascinating. He looked back at the Avari woman, who waited with the patience of stone. "Sure," he said, because what else could he say? "Watch all you want." She smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but it changed her face completely. "Thank you," she said. "My name is Lyran. Daniel." He gestured weakly toward the kitchen. "I'll just be over there, cooking." "Yes," she said. "I know." He returned to his prep station, hyper-aware of her gaze on his back. His hands felt clumsy suddenly, forgetting their confidence. He nearly dropped the knife twice, but as he worked, something strange happened. The weight of her attention didn't feel judgmental. It felt curious, warm even. When he finally glanced back, she was watching his hands move through the vegetables with the focus of someone reading a poem in a foreign language, trying to understand not just the words, but the music beneath them. The evening passed. Other customers came and went. Lyran never moved from her table, never ordered, never touched anything. She just watched. When he closed up at midnight, she stood gracefully. "Thank you for letting me see." "It's okay," Daniel said, not quite a question, not quite a statement. She moved toward the door, then paused. From her robes she drew something small and blue, a crystal that pulsed with inner light. She placed it on the counter between them. "For the fire," she said, "so it does not die." Before he could respond, she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Daniel picked up the crystal. It was warm in his palm, warmer than any stone should be. Through the window, he watched her disappear into the blue darkness of Tirvain's night. The empty table wasn't empty anymore. Somehow, that felt more dangerous than comforting. She came back the next night, and the night after that. Always at the same time, just after the dinner rush when the restaurant settled into its evening rhythm. Always to the same table. Always with that same quiet intensity, watching him cook like she was memorizing something sacred. Daniel stopped asking if she wanted food. Instead, he'd catch her eye when she arrived, get a small nod in return, and continue his work. It became a ritual, unspoken, but solid. On the 5th night, Mayor Torres cornered him by the supply closet. "You're feeding them now?" The mayor's face was red, his voice low and angry. "The Avari won't even eat our food, Rourke. They think we're beneath them." "She's not eating," Daniel said evenly. "She's just sitting. She's marking territory, making a point." Torres jabbed a finger at his chest. "My daughter works the mining crews. You know how the Avari overseers treat her? Like she's contaminated. And here you are, rolling out the welcome mat. It's just a table, Carlos. Nothing is just anything on this world." Torres stalked away, leaving Daniel with a knot in his stomach that wouldn't untie. That night he tried to make Liren taste something. Anything. He brought her a small bowl of broth, the simplest thing he could make, diluted until it was barely more than salted water. "Please," he said, "just try." Her eyes, gold in the lamplight, held something like pain. "I cannot." "Why not? Is it poison to you? Some kind of allergy?" "No." She looked at the bowl, then back at him. "For my people, your flavor would be dangerous." "Dangerous how? Like it'll make you sick?" She was quiet for a long moment. "It would make me feel." He didn't understand, but the way she said it, feel, sounded more frightening than any physical threat. "That doesn't make sense," he said softly. "No." Her lips curved, sad and understanding. "To you, it would not." He took the bowl back to the kitchen, dumped it in the sink. When he looked up, she was still watching him, and the expression on her face made his chest ache. The night wore on. He prepared meals, served customers, cleaned tables. Through it all, Liren remained, a silver constant in the corner of his vision. "Doctor." Chen approached the Avari woman directly, something no one else had dared. Daniel couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw Liren's face shift through several emotions: surprise, curiosity, something almost like amusement. When Chen returned to the bar, she was grinning. "She says your knife work is poetry and violence. I think that's a compliment?" "What else did she say?" "So, that humans heal through feeding, and her people heal through separation." Chen's smile faded. "Also that she shouldn't be here, that every night she comes, she risks something important." "Then why does she come?" Chen shrugged. "I asked," she said, "because he cooks as though it matters." At midnight, Liren stood to leave. This time Daniel met her at the door. "The crystal you gave me," he said. "It's too much. I can't accept." "You already did." She tilted her head, and he noticed how the iridescent patterns in her skin moved like living things. "My people believe that eating your food would let us absorb memories and pain." "That's why you can't taste it?" "Yes." She looked past him, at the kitchen, at the pots and pans hanging like a promise of warmth. "But I wonder if they are wrong. If perhaps what we would absorb is not pain, but the care that transforms it." She left before he could respond, but through the window he saw her pause on the street. Just for a moment. Her hand lifted to her face, and he realized she was breathing deeply, pulling in the scents that escaped into the night air. When he turned back, there were two Avari in dark uniforms across the street, watching the restaurant with expressions that held no warmth at all. The empty table suddenly felt like the most dangerous place in the galaxy. The nightmares came back on the 7th night. Daniel woke at 0300, his brother's face still fresh in his mind, still young, still smiling before the supply depot exploded, before the war became numbers instead of names, before Daniel learned that the last meal he'd ever cooked for his brother was burnt bread and regret. He gave up on sleep and went downstairs to prep for morning service. His hands moved through familiar tasks, dicing onions, deboning chicken, measuring spices. Cooking had been his therapy after the fleet, the only thing that made sense when everything else was ash. Food is a way of saying you matter, his brother had told him once, even if it's just burnt toast, especially if it's burnt toast. Daniel had failed at that, failed at keeping his brother fed, keeping him safe, keeping him alive. So now he cooked for strangers with the desperate focus of someone trying to atone for sins that couldn't be forgiven. Lorraine arrived at her usual time, but something was different. She wore fewer layers, and he could see the elegant lines of her collarbone, the way her skin seemed to glow brighter when she was tired. There was a ring on her finger she usually kept hidden, silver and complex, marked with symbols he recognized from Avari government buildings. She caught him staring. "Is something wrong?" "No, just you look tired." "I am." She settled into her chair with less grace than usual. "But I would rather be tired here than rested elsewhere." "Why?" She considered the question like she was weighing different truths, deciding which one was safe to share. "Because watching you cook is the only time I remember what it means to want something." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications he didn't dare examine. A new customer entered, a young Avari male who looked at Liren and went pale. He approached her table, spoke in their musical language, urgent and low. Liren responded sharply, and the male backed away, bowing. When he left, she looked shaken. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. "He recognized me. My family serves in the temples of purity." Her laugh was bitter. "I am the last person who should be here." "Why?" "Because I am supposed to protect my people from exactly this, from wanting things we cannot have, from tasting experiences that might contaminate our purpose." She met his eyes. "If I were to eat your food, I would be exiled, stripped of name and purpose, erased." His stomach dropped. "Then why do you keep coming?" "Because." Her voice broke on the word. "Every night I sit here, and I watch you pour care into food that I will never taste. And I think, this is what it means to be alive. This longing. This almost. This hunger that goes beyond hunger." She stood abruptly. "I should go." "Liren, if I stay, I will ask you to feed me." Her eyes shimmered not with tears because Avari didn't cry, but with something that looked just as painful. "And I am not ready to lose everything." "Not yet." She moved to the door, then paused. "That smell," she said so quietly he almost missed it. "The one that makes the whole restaurant warm. What is that?" "Cinnamon," he said. "And vanilla, from Earth." "It is." She breathed deeply, and her skin flared bright enough to cast shadows. "It is killing me softly." She said it wrong. The human idiom twisted in her accent, and despite everything, he almost smiled. Then the world exploded. The blast came from the mining depot 3 kilometers away, but they felt it in Haven's Rest, rattling windows, knocking pans off hooks. People screamed. Someone's drink shattered on the floor. Daniel ran outside. In the distance, flames painted the night sky orange and furious. Already he could hear sirens, see transport vehicles racing toward the explosion. Liren stood beside him, her face illuminated by distant fire. "The rebels," she whispered. "They finally struck. Rebels." Avari who want to break the old laws, who want to be free to choose. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw fear and something else, something that looked like recognition. "They are called the Tasters, and they are willing to die for what you do every night without thinking." The screams grew louder. In the distance, buildings collapsed. Daniel didn't think. He just moved, heading toward the chaos, toward the hurt, toward the place where people would need food and warmth and someone to tell them they mattered. Liren grabbed his arm, her touch electric and wrong, and exactly right. "Wait, I am coming with you. You don't have to—" "Yes," she said, "I do." They ran together into the smoke and fire, and Daniel realized with strange clarity that everything was about to change. That this night would be the line between before and after. That saving lives always came with a cost. He just didn't know the price would be her. The emergency shelter smelled like blood and smoke and fear. Daniel had commandeered the community center's kitchen, turning it into a makeshift field station. He'd done this before, during the war, feeding soldiers who had hours left to live and needed to feel human one more time. His hands remembered the work even if his mind wanted to forget. Boil water, sterilize surfaces, make broth, lots of broth, easy to digest, warm enough to trick the body into thinking everything would be okay. Lirayan worked beside him, organizing supplies with mechanical efficiency. She'd shed her silver robes for practical clothing someone had found, and without the formal wear, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more real. "Bandages in the north corner," she called out. "Medical supplies running low. We need someone to make a run to the pharmacy." A human volunteer sprinted out. Dr. Chen burst in with 3 more wounded, 2 human miners and an Avari child who wasn't moving. "Clear a space!" Chen shouted. Daniel grabbed clean towels, but Lirin was faster. She created a sterile area with practiced precision, and he realized she'd done this before, too. They all had. This colony was built on people who knew how to survive disasters. Mayor Torres stormed in, his face a mess of blood and rage. "The Avari did this. Their rebels want to drive us out, and—" "The rebels are Avari," Lirian said quietly, not looking up from helping Chen. "They attacked their own people because the depot supplied the temple guards. This is our civil war, not yours." Torres looked like he wanted to argue, but a miner was screaming for water, and the moment passed. Hours blurred together. Daniel cooked until his arms ached, huge pots of soup, simple carbohydrates, anything that would give people energy to survive the night. Liran moved through the chaos like a silver ghost, efficient and tireless. At one point, the lights failed. Emergency power kicked in, but it was dim, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. "Here," Liran's voice came from his left. "Take my hand. I can see better in low light." "Yeah." He reached out in the darkness and found her fingers. The contact sent a shock through him. Not painful, but intense, like touching a live wire made of starlight. Her skin was warm, warmer than he expected, and textured with those subtle patterns he'd noticed before. She led him through the maze of supplies, her hand steady in his. "You are shaking," she said. "It's just adrenaline." "No." She stopped, turned to face him in the darkness. He could barely see her, just the glow of her skin and eyes. "You are remembering something. Someone." "My brother, the war. I couldn't save him. And now you try to save everyone else. It's not enough. It's never enough." Her other hand found his shoulder. "Daniel, listen to me. Humans heal through feeding. That is your gift. You cook as though each meal is a small promise that death will not win. And tonight, because of you, it will not." "How do you know?" "Because I have watched you for 7 nights, and I have learned that you do not cook food. You cook hope." Her voice softened. "My people could learn from that. We heal through separation, through distance and cold efficiency, but I think we have forgotten how to heal at all." The lights flickered back on. In the sudden brightness, he saw tears tracking down her face. Not water, something luminous and silver, like liquid starlight. "You're crying." "Avari do not cry." "You're literally crying right now." She laughed, broken and beautiful. "Then I am breaking another law. Add it to the list." A sound from the corner, someone calling for help. They broke apart, back to work, but his hand still tingled where she'd held it. An hour later, Dr. Chen found him in the kitchen. "We've got a problem. That Avari kid, the one who came in unconscious, she's crashing. We don't have the right medicine for Avari physiology, and the temple won't send help because she's in a human facility." What does she need? Food, nutrients, her body is shutting down. Chen's face was grim. But Avari can't eat our food. Their dietary restrictions, it's not just cultural, it's biological. Our proteins are toxic to them. Daniel's mind raced. What about broth? Simple, diluted broth? The basic building blocks of nutrition? Theoretically, maybe. But no Avari has ever consumed human food. We don't know what would happen. We know what will happen if we don't try. Daniel was already moving, gathering ingredients. She'll die. He cooked with shaking hands, the simplest recipe he knew. Water, salt, minerals, nothing complex, nothing that could hurt her. Just enough to keep her alive. When he brought the bowl to where the child lay, Lorraine was there holding the small hand, singing something in her language that sounded like a lullaby and a prayer. This might save her, Daniel said, or it might kill her. I don't know. Liren looked at the bowl, then at him, then at the dying child. We give her a choice between certain death and possible life. That is more than my people usually offer. Together, they fed the child. Spoonful by careful spoonful, the girl didn't wake, but her throat worked, swallowing. They waited. Minutes stretched. The child's breathing steadied. Color returned to her luminous skin. She would live. Liren stood, walked to the corner, and pressed her forehead against the wall. Her shoulders shook. Daniel followed. You okay? She ate human food and lived. Liren's voice was wondering, terrified, hopeful. Everything we were taught is wrong. The taboo is a lie. Or maybe, Daniel said gently, it was just never about biology. Maybe it was always about something else. She turned, and her eyes held the weight of civilizations. If a child can eat, then so can I. The only thing stopping me is fear. And the law, and your position, and exile. Yes. Well, she looked at him like she was memorizing his face. All of that. Outside, sirens screamed. Through the window they saw ships descending from orbit, silver and sharp, marked with the symbols of the temple guard. They were coming for her. The child's parents arrived at dawn, their faces twisted with emotions Daniel couldn't name. Relief, horror, gratitude, disgust. She ate human food, the father said, staring at his daughter like she'd become something alien. She is contaminated. She is alive, Liren replied, her voice carrying an authority that made the couple step back. Would you prefer her dead and pure? They had no answer for that. They took their daughter and fled. But the look they gave Daniel made him feel like a monster who had saved a life through dark magic. By morning, word had spread. An Avari child had eaten human food and survived. The impossible had become possible, and possibility was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. The emergency shelter emptied as people returned to damaged homes or relocated. Daniel found himself alone in the kitchen, scrubbing pots that didn't need scrubbing, trying not to think about the temple ships growing larger in the sky. Liren found him there. They are coming for me, she said. I figured. I need to tell you something about who I am. She sat at the prep table looking small despite her height. My name is Lyrienne Valtheris. I am High Priestess of the Order of Purity. My family has guarded the food taboo for 7 generations. The pot slipped from his hands, clattering in the sink. You're a High Priestess? Was. After tonight, I will be nothing. She laughed, hollow. I came to Haven's Rest to document the danger of human influence, to prove that your food, your customs, your emotional contamination was a threat to Avari stability. I was supposed to observe and report. You were spying on me? Yes. She met his eyes, and I found exactly what I was looking for. Danger, contamination, threat. She paused, but not the kind they warned me about. What do you mean? They told me human food would poison us, that your emotions would weaken us, that exposure to your culture would destroy everything we are. Her voice cracked. They were right about everything except the most important thing, which is, they said it would destroy us. They did not say it would also heal us. She stood, moved to where he stood frozen by the sink. For 70 years my people have lived by the principle of separation. We do not touch, do not taste, do not allow ourselves to want anything beyond duty. We have become so pure that we have forgotten how to be alive. And now I have watched you cook 7 nights. I have seen you grieve and hope and care, all simultaneously, all messily human. I have watched you turn pain into food, and food into love. She reached out, stopped just short of touching his face. I have absorbed you through scent alone, Daniel Rourke. Every spice, every bread, every soup has told me a story about a species that heals through connection instead of isolation. I don't understand. The taboo was never about nutrition. It was about preventing my people from feeling what you feel, from caring as deeply, hurting as badly, hoping as irrationally as humans do. Her hand finally touched his cheek, and he felt that electric warmth again. Because once we start to care like you do, we cannot go back to cold efficiency. The old order crumbles. Is that why the rebels are called the tasters? Yes, they want to taste human food, human art, human emotion. They want to break the wall between our species. And the temples fear it, because they know the truth. That compassion is more contagious than any disease. That kindness, once experienced, cannot be unlearned. Outside the sound of landing ships, boots on pavement, orders being shouted in the Avari language. I saved that child, Daniel said. I'd do it again. I know. That is what terrifies them. That is what terrifies me. She pulled her hand back. You would feed anyone who was hungry. You would care for anyone who needed care. You do not calculate value or worthiness. You just cook as though every being in the universe deserves warmth. Don't they? My people would say no. That resources must be allocated efficiently. That emotion clouds judgment. That the individual serves the collective, and sacrifice is the highest virtue. She looked at the door where guards were approaching. But I have learned something in 7 nights of watching you. Something dangerous. What? That maybe the humans are right. Maybe care is not weakness. Maybe feeding the hungry, even when it costs you, even when it breaks your heart, maybe that is what makes a civilization worth saving. The door crashed open. 6 temple guards entered, weapons drawn but not raised. Between them walked an older Avari male, robes so ornate they seemed to bend light. High Priestess Valtharis, he said, you are summoned to answer charges of cultural contamination and violation of the sacred taboo. Liren straightened, becoming once again the priestess she'd been hiding. I will come willingly, Sumo Sacerdote. Wait. Daniel stepped forward. She didn't do anything wrong. She saved lives tonight. She witnessed the forbidden. The high priest's eyes were cold. She allowed human food to pass Avari lips. She has broken the oldest law of our people. Your law is killing you. Our law, the priest said quietly, has kept us alive for centuries, separate, pure, uncontaminated by the chaos of human emotion. He looked at Lirayen with something that might have been pity. You were sent to prove the danger. Instead, you became it. The guards moved to take her. Lirayen didn't resist, but as they led her to the door, she looked back at Daniel. The child lived, she said. Remember that. When they tell you it was wrong, remember that she lived. Then she was gone, and Daniel was alone in a kitchen that smelled like hope and tasted like ash. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, her face grim. They're taking her to the capital. Public trial. They're going to make an example of her. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. Daniel looked at the pots, the pans, the knives that knew his hands better than any weapon ever had. He thought about his brother, about all the meals he'd never cooked, all the chances he'd never taken to say you matter before it was too late. I can't just let her go. What can you do? You're one human cook against an entire civilization's fear. I can cook, Daniel said. It's the only thing I know how to do. Chen stared at him. You're not making sense. No, he agreed. But since when has sense ever saved anyone? Daniel closed the restaurant for 2 days. He spent those 48 hours researching, digging through every archive he could access about Avari culture, their history, their wars. Dr. Chen helped, along with a linguistics professor from the university and a half-drunk miner who claimed to have dated an Avari once, back before the taboos became strictly enforced. What they found made Daniel's blood run cold. 73 years ago, there had been a war, not between humans and Avari, but among the Avari themselves. A civil conflict that killed 30% of their population and nearly destroyed their civilization. The war had started over a simple question. Should the Avari join the Galactic Federation and open themselves to other species, or remain isolated? The isolationists won, but barely. And in the aftermath, terrified of more chaos, more death, more of the messy unpredictability that came with change, the Avari had instituted the taboos. No touching other species, no consuming their food, no emotional contamination. The rules weren't about biology. They were about control, about never letting their people care enough about outsiders to fight over them again. It's trauma, Chen said, staring at the data. Collective cultural trauma, calcified into law. They're not protecting themselves from us, Daniel realized. They're protecting themselves from feeling anything for us, because if they feel, they might care, and if they care, they might fight, and if they fight, they might destroy themselves. So Lyran was sent to prove that we're dangerous, that emotional connection with humans leads to contamination, chaos, collapse. He laughed bitterly. And then I went and proved her right by making her care. On the 3rd day, a message arrived, not for Daniel, but broadcast across the entire colony. Lorrain's trial would be public, transmitted throughout the system. The temples wanted everyone to see what happened when you broke the sacred taboo. Daniel watched the preliminary hearing in his empty restaurant. Lorraine stood in the center of a massive chamber, tiny against the architecture of judgment. Her silver robes were gone, replaced by plain gray. Her hair, which had flowed loose when she visited his restaurant, was bound severely. But her eyes, those impossible, iridescent eyes, were clear and unafraid. The sumo sacerdote spoke for hours, detailing her crimes. She had witnessed the forbidden. She had allowed contamination. She had, through her negligence, enabled an Avari child to consume human food. How do you answer these charges? He finally asked. Lyran's voice came through the speakers, calm as deep water. I confess to all of it. I witnessed human compassion. I was contaminated by human care. I enabled a dying child to choose life over purity. Gasps filled the chamber. The high priest looked almost sad. You understand what this means? Yes, exile, erasure, the end of everything I was. Then why? Ari, for the first time, emotion cracked her voice. Because I came here to prove humans were dangerous, and I discovered something far more terrifying than danger. What? That they were right. She looked directly at the camera, and Daniel felt like she was speaking only to him. We Avari believed that emotional connection was weakness, that caring for individuals over the collective was chaos, that love, hope, irrational compassion, all of it was contamination that would destroy us. It will destroy us. No. Lyrine's voice was soft but absolute. What will destroy us is this fear, this isolation, this purity that has made us so cold we cannot remember what we are supposed to be pure for. She turned to address the full council. 73 years ago, we fought a war that killed millions. We were so terrified of that pain. We built walls. We made rules. We separated ourselves from everything that might make us feel deeply enough to care, deeply enough to fight, deeply enough to live. And now? Now I have spent 7 nights watching a human cook food for strangers. Simple food, nothing grand or complicated. Just warm meals made with care. And every night I watched him grieve and hope simultaneously. I watched him carry pain and still choose kindness. I watched him remember loss and still feed the living. Her voice broke. I watched him be everything we are too afraid to be. Messy, emotional, irrationally compassionate. And I realized our fear has made us into something worse than chaotic. It has made us dead while still breathing. The chamber was silent. The human you observed, the high priest said carefully. What is his name? Daniel Rourke. And did he know who you were? What you came to do? No, he simply welcomed me. Let me watch. Asked nothing in return. She paused. He cooked as though I mattered, even when I could not taste what he made. He cared, even when there was no logical reason to care. And this? This contaminated you? Yes. She smiled, sad and beautiful. I have been absorbing him through scent alone. Every night, every meal, every moment of care translated into aroma and smoke. I have been eating his compassion without ever touching his food. I am already contaminated beyond saving. The high priest stood. Then you admit your guilt. You admit the human pose a danger to our way of life. Yes. Liren met his eyes. They pose the danger of reminding us what it means to be alive, and I believe that is a danger we desperately need. The screen went dark. The trial would resume tomorrow. Daniel sat in his empty restaurant, staring at the table where she used to sit, and realized with terrible clarity that she had destroyed herself to tell the truth. That she had chosen honesty over survival, just like he chose cooking over running, just like his brother chose staying over escaping. They were all the same, he thought, all too stubborn to save themselves, all too human, even when they weren't human at all. His calm chimed, a message, encrypted and anonymous. The tasters are with you. If you want to help her, come to the coordinates below. Come alone. Bring your knives. Daniel looked at his kitchen, at the tools of his trade, at the place he'd built to atone for not saving his brother. Then he started packing. If he couldn't save everyone, at least he could save one. The coordinates led to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Haven's Rest. Daniel went armed only with his chef's knives and a stubborn refusal to accept that kindness always lost. Inside, he found 12 Avari, all wearing the plain clothes of workers, all with the haunted look of people who had given up safety for something more dangerous. Hope. You are the cook, one said. Female, older, with scars that suggested she'd fought in the Civil War. The one who fed the child? I am. We are the tasters. We have broken the taboo. We have eaten human food and survived. We have felt human emotion and become stronger, not weaker. She gestured to the others. We are what the temples fear most. Proof that the old laws are built on lies. Can you help Lyrian? No. She is beyond our reach now. The temples have her in the highest security. Tomorrow they will sentence her to exile. She will be sent to the outer colonies, alone, stripped of name and memory. She will cease to exist. Daniel's hands clenched. There has to be something. There is nothing, unless... The woman looked at him with something like pity. Unless you are willing to do something very stupid. I've specialized in stupid my whole life. The trial is public. The final session will be broadcast across the system. If someone were to interrupt that broadcast, to force the council to confront their fear publicly, it might change minds. How do I interrupt? You would need to be there, in the chamber, with something that could not be ignored. She paused. We can get you in. We have allies in the temple still, Avari who question but do not yet rebel. But once you are inside, you would be alone. What do I do when I'm in? The old woman smiled. You do what you do best, Daniel Rourke. You cook. The plan was insane. It relied on timing, luck, and the hope that compassion could be more powerful than fear. Daniel should have said no, should have stayed in his restaurant, safe and small and useless. Instead, he said yes. That night, he closed Haven's Rest, maybe for the last time. He walked through the kitchen, touching each surface, remembering every meal, every customer, every moment that had brought him here. The blue crystal Lyran had given him sat on the counter, still pulsing with faint light. He picked it up, held it tight. "I couldn't save my brother," he told the empty room. "But maybe I can save her. Maybe that counts for something." The crystal warmed in his hand like it was answering. He tried to sleep. Failed. At 0300, he gave up and started baking bread. His brother's recipe, the one that had burnt the last time, the one he'd never quite forgiven himself for ruining. This time, he got it right. Golden crust, soft interior, the smell filling his small apartment above the restaurant like a prayer. Mayor Torres found him at dawn, standing outside the restaurant with a packed bag and a determined expression. "You're going to do something stupid," Torres said. "Probably." "That Avari woman, she's not worth your life." Daniel looked at the mayor, saw the fear and prejudice and exhaustion of a man trying to hold a fractured community together. "She sat in my restaurant for 7 nights. Never asked for anything, just watched me cook. And every night, she chose hunger over safety because she wanted to understand what it meant to care. So she's already braver than I'll ever be. The least I can do is show up." Torres was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small data chip. "My daughter, the one who works the mines. An Avari overseer gave her this. Said if you were serious about helping, you'd need it." "What is it?" "Access codes, floor plans, timing for the guard rotations." Torres looked away. "Apparently some of them are with you, the ones who are tired of being afraid." Daniel took the chip, felt its weight. "Thank you?" "Don't thank me. Just don't die." Torres walked away, then stopped. "And if you somehow pull this off, if you somehow change their minds, come back and teach my daughter to cook. She says your food smells like hope. I'd like her to learn how to make that." The transport to the capital left at noon. Daniel was on it, surrounded by Avari civilians, his human face drawing stares, but no challenges. The tasters had provided him with documents, a cover story, a chance. Through the window, he watched Tervain's blue mountains recede. He thought about Lyran in her cell, alone, preparing to lose everything. He thought about his brother, who had been alone at the end too, with nothing but burnt bread and distant explosions. He thought about all the meals he'd cooked, all the care he'd poured into food that couldn't save anyone from death but might, just might, remind them they were alive before the end. The capital rose on the horizon, massive, gleaming, beautiful and cold as starlight. Daniel clutched his bag of knives and thought, "I am one human cook against an empire of fear. I have no weapons but kindness, no strategy but showing up, no plan but to cook in the face of judgment and hope that warmth matters more than purity." It was the stupidest thing he'd ever done. It was also the only thing that made sense. At the checkpoint, a young Avari guard looked at his papers, then at his face. "You are the human," she said quietly. "Yes." She stamped his documents. As he passed, she whispered, "My brother was at the shelter. You fed him soup when he thought he would die. He is alive because of you. I'm glad. Do not fail tomorrow. We are counting on you to remind them." She met his eyes, and hers were shining. Remind them what it means to choose care over fear. Daniel entered the capital carrying illegal cooking supplies and a terrible plan, and for the first time since his brother died, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was finally cooking the right meal, even if it was the last one he'd ever make. The safe house was a small apartment overlooking the temple district, provided by tasters who had more courage than sense. Daniel spent the night going over the plan, which was less a plan and more a series of desperate hopes strung together with prayer. Dr. Chen arrived at midnight, having followed him against his wishes. "You didn't seriously think I'd let you do this alone?" "It's not your fight. A woman is being exiled for saving a child's life. That's everyone's fight." She dropped a bag on the table. "I brought portable cooking equipment, battery-powered heating elements, compact prep surfaces. If you're going to cook in a courtroom, you'll need better tools than determination." Others came as the night wore on. The linguistics professor with translation software. 3 human miners who claimed they owed Daniel for feeding them through depression and homesickness. Even Mayor Torres showed up, shamefaced but present. "My daughter wouldn't speak to me if I didn't come," he muttered. "Said you were either the bravest man alive or the stupidest, and either way she wanted me on the right side of history." By dawn, there were 20 humans in the apartment, all ready to help, none with any real power. "This is insane," Daniel said, looking at them. "You all know that, right? We're going to interrupt a trial, break into a secure facility, violate about 40 laws, and for what? To cook bread in front of judges? To prove a point," Chen said. "That care matters more than rules. That compassion is worth the risk. That humanity at its best shows up for the ones who need us, even when it's stupid, especially when it's stupid." "She's right," Torres said gruffly. "My grandfather used to say, the measure of a civilization is who it protects when protection costs everything. Well, this is going to cost us. Might as well make it count." Daniel looked at his hands, scarred from years of cooking, steady, despite the fear. "Okay, this is how it's going to work." He laid out the plan. It was complex, relying on timing, misdirection, and the hope that the Avari tasters embedded in the temple staff would do their part. Chen would create a distraction. The miners would handle security if things went wrong. Torres would coordinate communications, and Daniel would cook. "What are you making?" the professor asked. "Bread. My brother's recipe, the one I got right." He pulled out the ingredients. Simple flour, water, yeast, salt. It's not fancy. It's not complicated. It's just warm and honest and human. "And you think that will change minds?" "No." Daniel smiled sadly. "But it might remind them what they're afraid of. And sometimes, confronting your fear is the first step to overcoming it." At sunrise, he started baking. The apartment filled with the smell of rising dough, of yeast and warmth and promise. The others watched in silence as he kneaded, shaped, let the loaves rise. "It's almost time," Chen said, checking her chrono. "The trial resumes in 2 hours." Daniel slid the bread into the makeshift oven. "Then we better not be late." The Temple of Judgment was a massive structure, all soaring ceilings and cold light. Security was tight, but the tasters had provided access through a maintenance entrance. Daniel and 3 others slipped in, carrying equipment disguised as cleaning supplies. Inside, they navigated corridors that twisted like a maze, following the map on Torres's stolen data chip. Twice they encountered guards. Twice the guards looked away, and Daniel realized these were the believers, the ones who had eaten forbidden food and wanted to see the world change. They reached a storage room adjacent to the main chamber. Through the walls, Daniel could hear voices, the murmur of a crowd, the formal cadence of legal proceedings. "This is as far as we can get you," whispered their taster guide, a young male with nervous eyes. "From here, you are on your own." "Thank you." "Do not thank me. If you fail, we all die. If you succeed, everything changes." He gripped Daniel's shoulder. "I tasted chocolate last year, human chocolate smuggled from Earth. It was the most beautiful moment of my life. I understood then why they forbid it, because once you taste joy, you cannot accept numbness." He left, and Daniel was alone with Chen and the equipment. "You ready?" Chen asked. "No, you?" "Terrified, let's do this." They set up the portable kitchen, assembling it with quiet efficiency. Daniel placed the bread, still warm from transport, on the makeshift counter. He had other ingredients too, simple things that would fill the air with scent. Cinnamon, vanilla, butter melting in a pan. "When I give the signal," Daniel said, "you activate the broadcast hack. Make sure every screen in this system shows what happens next." "Daniel," Chen grabbed his arm, "once you step out there, there's no going back. You'll be breaking their most sacred law in their most sacred space. They might kill you." "I know. Then why?" He thought about his brother, about Liren watching him cook for 7 nights, about a child who lived because someone chose to care more than to obey. "Because someone has to show up," he said. "Someone has to stand in front of fear and say, 'This is wrong. We can be better. We can care more.'" He looked at Chen. That someone might as well be the cook who doesn't know how to quit. Through the wall, he heard the sumo sacerdote's voice. "Liren Valtheris, you have been found guilty of contamination. Have you any final words before sentencing?" There was a pause. Then Liren's voice, clear and unbroken. "Yes, I would like to say that I regret nothing, that compassion was worth the cost, that the human who fed a dying child taught me more about honor than 7 generations of priesthood, and that if caring is contamination, then I hope everyone in this chamber becomes infected." The crowd gasped. The sumo sacerdote began to respond, and Daniel stepped through the door into the chamber of judgment, carrying bread that smelled like hope and tasted like revolution. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. "Before you sentence her, there's something you need to see." 10,000 Avari faces turned toward him. The trial had just become something else entirely. For 3 seconds, nothing moved. The chamber held its breath. Then chaos erupted. Guards rushed forward. The sumo sacerdote stood, his face a mask of fury. Liren, in the defendant's circle, went pale with horror and something that might have been hope. Daniel raised his hands, showing he held no weapons. Just bread. Just flour-dusted hands, and the audacity to believe that kindness mattered. "I am Daniel Rourke," he said, his voice carrying in the vast space. "I am the human who fed the child. I am the one who contaminated your high priestess. And I am here to tell you that everything you fear is real." The guards stopped, confused. The sumo sacerdote gestured them back. "Let him speak. Let everyone hear the human confess his crimes." Daniel walked toward the center of the chamber, toward Liren, who watched him with eyes that held 1,000 warnings. He set his portable kitchen on the floor. Chen, brilliant Chen, activated the broadcast hack. Every screen in the system was now showing this moment. "I do confess," Daniel said. "I am guilty of caring for a dying child. I am guilty of feeding the hungry. I am guilty of cooking meals for someone who could not eat them, just because she asked to watch." He looked at the council. "I am guilty of being human, and if that is a crime, then sentence me too. You dare mock our laws?" The high priest's voice shook with rage. "No, I dare question them." Daniel began unpacking his equipment. "You say human food contaminates, that our emotions weaken, that connection with us brings chaos and death." He pulled out the bread, golden and perfect. "You're right. We are dangerous, but not in the way you think." He placed the bread on the portable oven, let it heat. The scent began to fill the chamber, warm and impossible to ignore. 73 years ago, you fought a civil war. Millions died. You were so traumatized, so terrified of that pain, that you built walls. You made laws. You chose purity over feeling, isolation over connection, fear over love. You know nothing of our history. I know you're still fighting that war." Daniel's voice softened. "You're just fighting it inside yourselves now. Every time an Avari wants to reach out, wants to connect, wants to care about something beyond duty, you shut it down. You call it contamination. You call it weakness." He pulled out butter, let it melt in a pan. The aroma mixed with the bread, creating something that made even the stone-faced judges shift uncomfortably. "But here's what I learned from Liren. Your taboo was never about biology. It was never about nutrition or poison or physical harm. He looked directly at her. It was about preventing your people from feeling what we feel, from caring so deeply it hurts, from loving so hard you'd fight wars over it, from being so irrationally compassionate that you'd break every rule to save one life. And that is precisely why it must be forbidden. The sumo sacerdote's voice cracked. We cannot survive such chaos. You're not surviving now. Daniel gestured to the chamber full of Avari, rigid and afraid. You're just existing. There's a difference. A commotion at the back. Temple guards trying to remove someone. But more people were arriving, Avari and humans both, flooding in despite security. The tasters, Daniel realized. They were making their move. One of them, the old woman from the warehouse, stood. I am Commander Selvara. I fought in the Civil War. I lost my daughter to that conflict. She pulled something from her coat. A small wrapped package. And 20 years ago, I tasted human food for the first time. Chocolate, from a smuggler who told me it would change my life. She unwrapped it, ate it there in the chamber, in front of everyone. She was right. It did change me. I learned that sweetness exists, that pleasure without purpose is valid, that joy does not weaken, it strengthens. She looked at the council. I have broken your law every year since. I am contaminated beyond saving, and I am more alive than I was in 70 years of purity. Others stood, dozens of them, Avari from all castes, all roles, each confessing to tasting forbidden food, each describing not corruption, but awakening. Enough! The sumo sacerdote raised his hand. This is mass hysteria. The human has orchestrated. I orchestrated nothing. Daniel pulled the bread from the oven, placed it on the altar in front of the council. I just cooked. I do it every day. For miners and scientists and Avari who sit in corners and watch. I do it because someone taught me that food is a way of saying you matter, even if you're gone, even if you can't eat it, even if all you can do is smell it and remember that somewhere, someone cared enough to make warmth. He broke the bread open. Steam rose, carrying scent into every corner of the massive chamber. Daniel heard gasps, saw Avari faces change, saw tears, actual tears, on faces that supposedly could not cry. You call this contamination, he said. I call it truth. We humans are messy. We care too much and hope too hard and break our hearts over strangers. We cook for the hungry and hold the dying and show up even when it's stupid. He held up a piece of bread. This is all I have. Flour, water, salt, time, and the stubborn belief that warmth matters. You can exile Liren for witnessing it. You can exile all the tasters for tasting it. You can build your walls higher and your laws stricter. He placed the bread on the council's table. Or you can smell this and tell me honestly that it smells like danger. Silence. Then impossibly, the sumo sacerdote stood. He approached the bread. He looked at it like it was a weapon that might destroy everything he'd built. I cannot eat this, he said. I know. If I do, the entire order collapses. Centuries of law become meaningless. Yes. The high priest reached out. His hand hovered over the bread. 30 years ago, before I became sumo sacerdote, I tasted human coffee. Once. Just once. His voice broke. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. I understood then why we forbid it. Because if my people knew such beauty existed, they would tear down every wall to reach it. He pulled back his hand. So I never tasted it again. And I enforced the laws with absolute conviction, because I believed our survival depended on staying pure, staying separate, staying safe. He looked at Lorraine, then at Daniel, then at the chamber full of Avari who had confessed their contamination. But we did not survive, he whispered. We are a civilization of ghosts, going through motions, calling it honor. He picked up the bread. If this destroys us, perhaps we deserve destruction. He ate, The chamber erupted, shouts of horror, of triumph, of shock. The other council members stood, torn between duty and something else, something that looked like relief. "The law is clear," someone shouted. "He has violated the law," the sumo sacerdote said, his eyes streaming with luminous tears. "Was made by fearful people trying to prevent pain. But we cannot prevent pain. We can only choose whether to face it alone or together." He turned to Liraine. "You came to prove humans were dangerous. You were correct. They are. They remind us what it means to be alive, and there is nothing more dangerous than that." He raised his voice. "I move that the sacred taboo be reformed. Let it become choice, not law. Let each Avari decide for themselves whether to taste, to touch, to risk contamination for the possibility of connection." "That is madness," a council member cried. "Yes," the sumo sacerdote agreed. "Beautiful, terrifying, necessary madness, the kind that humans specialize in." Liraine stepped forward. "I will accept exile if the council wishes. But I ask one thing. Let Daniel Rourke return home. He broke no Avari law. He simply cooked." "No," Daniel said. "We both go free or we both stay." She smiled at him, finally free to show emotion. "That is exactly the kind of irrational human gesture I have learned to love." The vote took hours, debate raged, but in the end, 47 council members tasted Daniel's bread. 47 chose contamination over purity. The law changed. The walls began to crumble. And in the center of it all, Daniel Rourke, a cook who couldn't save his brother, but maybe, just maybe, save something bigger, stood beside an Avari priestess who had risked everything to learn what it meant to care. "You destroyed my civilization," Liraine said softly. "You helped," Daniel replied. "Yes," she agreed. "I did." They left the chamber together, walking into a galaxy that suddenly had room for both of them. 6 months later, Haven's Rest looked different. The restaurant had expanded, taking over the empty shop next door. Now there were 2 dining areas. One served traditional human food. The other, carefully designed with Avari nutritionists, offered dishes that could be safely consumed by both species. Not quite human, not quite Avari. Something new, something possible. Daniel stood in the kitchen at dawn prepping for the day when Liraine emerged from the back office carrying inventory lists and wearing an apron that read, "Will work for food," in both languages. "You are burning the onions," she said. "I'm caramelizing them." You are burning them." "It's called a Maillard reaction. It is called a mistake." But she was smiling. 6 months of working together, and they had developed the easy rhythm of people who had survived something impossible and decided to build something beautiful on the other side. She took over the onions. He let her, even though she'd probably overcorrect and undercook them. They had learned to negotiate, to compromise, to argue about temperature and timing like it was the most important thing in the world. Because sometimes it was. The first customers arrived at Euro 700, a mixed group, human miners and Avari engineers, sitting at the same table, sharing the same meal. It was becoming common now, not everywhere, not yet, but here in Haven's Rest, it was possible to forget that 6 months ago such a thing would have been illegal. The child they had saved, her name was Kyle, stopped by with her parents. She'd become something of a symbol, the first Avari to publicly eat human food and survive. Now she was thriving, healthy, and curious, asking endless questions about cooking that Daniel patiently answered. "Can I help today?" she asked, eyes bright with hope. "Ask your boss," Daniel said, nodding at Liraine. Liraine pretended to consider. "If you promise not to burn the onions." "I promise." They set her to work washing vegetables. Her parents watched with expressions that were still complicated, still processing, but no longer horrified. Progress was slow, Daniel had learned, but it was progress. Mayor Torres came in at noon, bringing his daughter, who had indeed started learning to cook. She and Loren had formed an unlikely friendship, the human teenager and the former high priestess bonding over their shared inability to properly fold dumplings. "You've changed this town," Torres said, accepting a bowl of the hybrid soup that had become the restaurant's signature dish. "Changed the whole damn colony." We just cook," Daniel replied. "You know it's more than that." Torres lowered his voice. "The temples are still fighting the reforms. There are protests. Some Avari refuse to accept the new laws." "I know. Are you worried?" Daniel looked at Liren, who was teaching Kale how to taste for salt, explaining that seasoning was about balance, not rules. "Every day. But I'm also hopeful. That's new for me." At closing time, when the last customer had left and the kitchen was clean, Daniel and Liren stood at the original table. The one she had sat at for 7 nights, watching him cook, neither of them knowing it would lead to revolution. Someone had installed a small plaque, reserved for first connections. "Do you miss it?" Daniel asked. "Being a priestess, having purpose." "Ah, I have purpose now." She gestured at the restaurant, at the evidence of their impossible collaboration. "I teach people that it is safe to taste, safe to care, safe to be contaminated by connection. That is bigger than any temple." "Do you regret it? Everything you lost?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she went to the kitchen and returned with 2 plates. On each a slice of bread, golden and warm. The same bread he had brought to the trial, the bread that had broken an empire's fear. "Taste this with me," she said. They sat at the table. They each took a piece, and for the first time they ate together, truly together, sharing not just space but sustenance. The bread was perfect, simple and honest and warm. "This tastes like home," Liren said, her voice thick with emotion. "It always did," Daniel replied. She reached across the table, took his flour-dusted hand in hers. "You saved my life, you know. You saved mine first. You reminded me why I cook. Not to atone for loss, but to celebrate what remains. We are very foolish," she said, "thinking that food can change the world. Probably, but we're foolishly right." She laughed, the sound filling the empty restaurant like music. "I used to think humans were dangerous because you feel too much. Now I understand. You are dangerous because you make us want to feel too. You make isolation seem like the prison it always was." "Is that a compliment?" "Yes, an enormous one." They finished their bread in comfortable silence. Outside, Tervain's moons rose, painting the blue mountains silver. Through the window, Daniel could see both human and Avari walking the streets together. Not yet easy, not yet natural, but trying. "What do we do tomorrow?" Liren asked. "Same thing we do every day. We cook, we feed people, we show up." "That simple? That complex?" He squeezed her hand. "We prove that care is not contamination, that compassion is not chaos, that maybe, just maybe, the willingness to break bread with someone different is how civilizations actually survive." She stood, pulled him up with her. Together they walked to the kitchen, where the fire still burned in the oven, kept alive by a blue crystal that pulsed with steady light. "I need to tell you something," Liren said. "The sumo sacerdote wants to meet with us. He has a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "He wants us to teach, to travel to other Avari worlds and show them what is possible when fear becomes choice, to cook for those who have never tasted anything but duty." Daniel looked at his restaurant, his refuge, his redemption. Then he looked at Liren, who had given up everything to tell the truth, who had chosen exile over lies, who had proven that caring was worth any cost. "When do we leave?" "You would go? Leave Haven's Rest?" "Haven's Rest isn't a place," Daniel said. "It's what happens when you show up for people. We can do that anywhere." She smiled, luminous and free. "Then we leave in 3 weeks, time enough to train your replacement." "Torres's daughter?" Who else? She has the gift. She cooks like she's trying to heal the universe, one meal at a time. Lirian paused. Like you. They spent the rest of the night planning, dreaming, imagining a future where restaurants like Haven's Rest existed on every Avari world, where the walls kept crumbling, where fear kept losing to care. At dawn, Daniel stepped outside to watch the sunrise. The blue mountains caught the light, turning the color of hope instead of bruises. Beautiful, without the pain, just beauty for its own sake. Lirian joined him, bringing coffee for him and tea for herself, both steaming in the cold morning air. "Thank you," she said, "for cooking meals I could not eat, for caring when there was no logical reason to care, for showing up even when it was stupid. Thank you for watching, for risking everything to understand, for choosing hunger over safety, then choosing both." They stood together, two beings from different worlds, bound by something simpler and stronger than law or taboo or fear, bound by the stubborn belief that every person deserves warmth, that every hunger, physical or emotional, deserves to be fed, that showing up with care and flour-dusted hands can crack empires and rebuild them into something worth living in. The restaurant behind them would open in 3 hours. There would be customers, human and Avari, hesitant and hopeful. There would be meals cooked with precision and love. There would be small miracles happening in ceramic bowls and on shared plates. But right now, in this moment, there was just dawn and coffee, and two people who had learned that the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't chaos or contamination or connection. It's the willingness to care despite the cost, to cook even when no one can eat, to show up even when you might lose everything, to believe irrationally and stubbornly that warmth matters more than walls, that compassion wins in the end, that love, in all its forms, is worth breaking every rule for. "Ready?" Lirian asked. Daniel smiled, tasting cinnamon and vanilla on the morning air, feeling the weight of knives at his belt, remembering his brother and Lirian's first visit and the child who lived and all the impossible things that had brought him here. "Always," he said, "let's go cook." And they did. Not because it would fix everything, not because it was easy, not because anyone asked them to, but because someone had to show up. Someone had to stand in front of fear with flour on their hands and say, "This is better. We can be better. We can care more." And maybe, just maybe, that simple, stubborn human gesture, repeated every day, meal after meal, table after table, would be enough to remind the galaxy what it had forgotten. That we don't survive through purity or isolation or fear. We survive by feeding each other, by sharing warmth, by choosing, again and again, to care for the stranger who walks through our door and sits at the empty table. That's not contamination. That's humanity. And maybe that's exactly what the universe needs. In the quiet act of cooking, a simple human gesture, Daniel Rourke discovered the unspeakable truth that caring, irrationally and stubbornly, is what keeps civilizations alive. Not the walls we build to protect ourselves from the chaos of emotion, but the warmth we offer even when it costs everything. Compassion, the very thing that can destroy an empire, is the one thing that can save it. The question is, when faced with that truth, do we choose the safety of isolation or the terrifying power of connection? Today, I invite you to reflect on the power of compassion, to ask yourself what you're willing to risk in order to care for others. If this story resonated with you, leave the word nourishment in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. Let's start a conversation about what it means to care. Don't forget to subscribe if you're ready to embrace that same courage. Like, share, and spread this story if you believe that warmth is something we all deserve, especially in times of chaos. Watch the next video on the card and keep the flame alive, because we are not meant to survive in isolation. We are meant to survive together.